are at the end of 1871. You are traveling through Labette County, Kansas, when you stumble upon a small inn and general store run by a nice family, the Benders. Exhausted and hungry, you decided to stop for a meal and rest. Inside, the Benders seem welcoming. They install you at a nice table next to a window, offering you food and a big smile. You don't know it yet, but this will be your last meal. As you sit down, you notice a presence behind you. Suddenly, you feel a sharp blow to the head and fall unconscious. Your body is then thrown through a trap door into a basement where your throat is slit and your valuables are taken. You've just fallen victim to the Bloody Benders. Who are the Bloody Benders? The Bender family, also known as the Bloody Benders, were a German family of serial killers who lived and operated in Labette County, Kansas during the beginning of the 1870s in the late 19th century. The family was a family of four. John Bender Sr., 60 years old, also known as Pa Bender, was the patriarch of the Bender family. He was a large, imposing figure, known for his grumpiness and unfriendly demeanor. Little is known about his past before arriving in Kansas, but he posed as a German immigrant with limited English skills. He was involved in the family's murderous activities, often helping to overpower and kill the victims. Elvira Bender, 42 years old, also referred to as Ma Bender, was the matriarch of the family. She was known for her harsh and unapproachable nature, often described by neighbors as a she-devil. Elvira was believed to be John Sr.'s wife, though some accounts suggest she was his common-law wife or even his sister. She played a crucial role in the murders, typically handling the victims' final moments after they were incapacitated. John Bender Jr., 25 years old, the son of John Sr. and Elvira, was a tall and strong man. He was often seen as odd or mentally unstable, speaking with a strange, high-pitched laugh. He pretended to be slow-witted, but was an integral part of the family's criminal activities, helping to lure and overpower the victims. Kate Bender, 23 years old, the daughter of John Sr. and Elvira, was perhaps the most charismatic and cunning member of the family. She was in her mid-20s and advertised herself as a healer and spiritualist, drawing visitors to the Bender home. Kate was known for her good looks and charm, which she used to gain the trust of travelers. She was deeply involved in the family's murderous operations, often initiating conversations with potential victims and participating in their killings. The Benders were considered by all to be German immigrants, although only the men were born abroad. John Bender Sr. was born Johann Flickinger in Hanover or the Netherlands. Elvira Bender, born Make, came from the Adirondack Mountains and had initially married George Griffith, with whom she had 12 children. She married several times, with each of her husbands dying from a head injury. Kate was Almira Bender's fifth child, born Eliza Griffith. After her marriage, Kate took the name Sarah Eliza Davis. John Jr. was born John Gebhardt. How did the murders start? The Bender family arrived in Labette County, Kansas, around 1870, claiming 160 acres of land, 65 hectares, next to the Great Osage Trail, which was the only open road for those traveling westward. They constructed a one-room cabin divided by a canvas curtain into two areas. The front served as a general store and dining area, while the back was their living quarters. Kate Bender, the charismatic and attractive daughter, played an important role in their scheme. She distributed flyers and advertised herself as a healer and spiritualist, offering seances and healing sessions, which drew numerous travelers to their home. Professor Miss Katie Bender can heal all sorts of diseases, can cure blindness, fits and deafness, and all such diseases, also deaf and dumbness. Residents, 14 miles east of Independence, on the road from Independence to Osage Mission, 1.5 miles southeast of Norahhead Station, June 18, 1872. The Benders' method of killing was always the same. When a traveler seemed rich and decided to stay the night, they were offered the seat of honor at the head of the dining table, which was strategically placed over a trapdoor leading to the cellar. While the guest dined, their back to the canvas curtain, one of the male Benders, either John Sr. or John Jr., would strike them on the back of the head with a hammer or a maul from behind the curtain. This blow would either kill the victim instantly or render them unconscious. Immediately after the initial attack, Kate or Elvira would come around and slit the victim's throat to ensure they were dead. The body would then be dropped through the trapdoor into the cellar. In the cellar, the bodies were stripped of valuables and later buried in the garden or orchard behind the cabin. The Benders often dismembered the corpses to make the burial easier and to conceal the crime. More than a dozen bullet holes were found in the roof and walls of the cabin, possibly indicating that some of the victims had tried to defend themselves after being struck with a hammer. The victims of the family: George Longcore and baby Mary Ann. George Longcore, also known as George Launcher, and his 18-month-old daughter Mary Ann were traveling to Iowa after the death of his wife. They disappeared in the winter of 1872. Dr. William Henry York, a prominent physician, disappeared in March 9, 1873, while traveling from Fort Scott to Independence, Kansas. He was investigating the disappearance of his neighbors, George Longcore and his daughter. His brothers, Colonel Ed York and Kansas Senator Alexander York, launched an extensive search when he did not return. Henry McKenzie of Hamilton County, Indiana, who was missing since December 5, 1872, was another traveler who met his end at the hands of the Bender family. Johnny Boyle, a man traveling to Independence, Kansas, vanished and was later found in the Bender orchard with the same fatal injuries. W.F. McCrotty, a resident of Cedarville, another lone traveler, was found in the Bender garden. D. Brown, a resident of Cedarville, who had been trading horses in the neighborhood with a man named Johnson. The victims we couldn't identify. Numerous other bodies were discovered on the Bender property, many of whom remain unidentified to this day. These included lone travelers, many of whom were not immediately missed due to their transient lifestyles. The bodies we never found. Several other disappearances were attributed to the Benders, though their bodies were never found. This includes various travelers who were reported missing in the area during the time the Benders operated their inn. The true number of victims could be much higher, as many frontier travelers left little trace behind, making it difficult to identify all who fell victim to the Benders. The suspicions and investigations. The investigation into the Bender family began in earnest following their abrupt disappearance in 1873, spurred by the growing suspicions of their neighbors and the inquiries led by Colonel Ed York, who was searching for his missing brother, Dr. William York. The Dr. William York himself was looking for George Longcore and his baby girl, Mary Ann. Colonel York, along with a group of volunteers, decided to search the Bender property after receiving conflicting and suspicious information from the Benders during previous visits. When the search party arrived at the Bender cabin, they found it abandoned, with the livestock left unfed and the house stripped of most belongings, suggesting a hurried departure. Inside the cabin, the searchers discovered a trapdoor in the floor of the living room, which was nailed shut. After struggling to open it, they were met with a horrific sight. The blood-soaked cellar beneath the trapdoor. The cellar was filled with the stench of decaying flesh, and although no bodies were found directly in the cellar, it was evident that it had been used as a place to hold and murder the victims. Blood had seeped into the soil, indicating that the bodies had been stored there before being buried. Further investigation led the search party to the Bender orchard. In a small 1/2-acre orchard adjoining the house, the surface of the ground had been carefully plowed and harrowed, but there had just been a heavy rainfall, and in a certain place the ground had settled very noticeably, and the settled portion was about the size of a grave. Ground was then dug up, and the badly decomposed body of Dr. York was found. Dr. William York, found buried in a shallow grave with his skull crushed and his throat slit. The discovery confirmed Colonel York's worst fears and intensified the search efforts. Number 1 W.F. McCrotty, who was contesting a case before the land office in Independence and who probably stopped at Bender's for refreshments. Number 2, D. Brown, a resident of Cedarville. Brown's body was decomposed beyond recognition, but it was identified through a silver ring which Brown wore and which he had shown to Johnson. Number 3, Henry F. Mackenzie of Hamilton County, Indiana, who had been missing since December 5, 1872. He was en route to Independence for the purpose of locating there. His sister, Mrs. J. Thompson, identified his wearing apparel. Number 4 and 5, Mr. Longcore and his baby girl. Number 6 and 7 were the unidentified bodies of 2 men. The first body discovered was that of, as the digging continued, the volunteers recovered multiple bodies in various states of decomposition. These included George Longcore and his daughter Mary Ann, whose bodies were found together. George's skull had been crushed and his throat slit, while Mary Ann's small body showed signs of a violent death. The most plausible theory is that Mary Ann was thrown in the digged hole and her deceased father was thrown on top of her, which led her to suffocate until she passed Aswell. Other bodies discovered included those of Henry Mackenzie, Johnny Boyle, W.F. McCrotty, and several unidentified victims, all showing the same brutal injuries. The searchers also found personal belongings and clothing of the victims, further linking the murders to the Bender family. The number of bodies and the gruesome nature of the injuries shocked the local community and got national attention, making headlines across the country. In the following weeks, a nationwide manhunt was launched to capture the Benders, but they had vanished without a trace. Numerous sightings were reported, and various arrests were made, but none were definitively proven to be the Bender family. The closest authorities came was in 1884 when 2 women were arrested in Michigan and identified as Ma Bender and Kate, but they were later released due to lack of conclusive evidence. About a mile from the Bender's Tavern was a grocery store owned by a man named Brockman, a close friend and former business partner of John Bender from 1869 to 1871. Due to their close association, authorities suspected Brockman might have been involved in the murders or possessed valuable information about the crimes and Bender's whereabouts. A group of men captured Brockman, took him to a secluded area 8 miles away, and threatened to hang him unless he confessed everything he knew. He begged for mercy, insisting he knew nothing about the Benders' actions. The group of men hanged him, but when he was near death, they brought him down and revived him. They demanded a confession, but he still said he didn't know anything. They repeated this process 3 times. In the end, they left him lying on the ground, semi-conscious. The Bender property became a macabre tourist attraction, with visitors flocking to see the House of Horrors, where so many had met their gruesome end. Pieces of the cabin and items found on the property were taken as souvenirs. Despite the intense investigation and numerous leads, the fate of the Bender family remains unknown. However, as there has been much speculation as to the fate of the family, here's a letter correspondence between the chiefs of police of the cities of Independence and Cherryvale, Kansas. Cherryvale, Kansas, June 14th, 1910. Dear Sir, yours just received. It so happened that my father-in-law's farm joins the Bender farm, and he helped to locate the bodies of the victims. I often tried to find out from him what became of the Benders, but he only gave me a knowing look and said he guessed they would not bother anyone else. There was a vigilance committee organized to locate the Benders, and shortly afterward Old Man Bender's wagon was found by the roadside riddled with bullets. You will have to guess the rest. I am respectfully yours, J.N. Kramer, Chief of Police. Independence, Kansas, June 14th, 1910. Dear Sir, in regard to the Bender family, I will say that I have lived here 40 years, and it is my opinion that they never got away. A vigilance committee was formed, and some of them are still here, but they will not talk except to say that it would be useless to look for them, and they smile at the reports of some of the family having been recently located. The family nearly got my father. He intended to stay there one night, but he became suspicious, and although they tried to coax him to stay, he hitched up his team and left. Regretting that I cannot give you more information, I am yours respectfully, D.M. Van Cleve, Chief of Police.